The United States, our Western allies, and indeed the civilized world are facing a global jihad that is dedicated to the destruction of our way of life. While certain terrorist groups, such as ISIS, receive understandable attention, the global jihadist movement is not limited to members of ISIS. Indeed, the terrorists who massacred 13 Americans in California were dedicated to jihad before ISIS even rose to prominence. To protect the American people, terrorists cannot be allowed to gain access to the United States. To gain entry into the United States, citizens of most countries must obtain visas issued at overseas embassies and consulates by the State Department following an in-person interview with the Department of State consular officer. An exception to this rule is the Visa Waiver Program. Established in 1986, the program allows foreign nationals of 38 countries to enter the United States as temporary non-immigrant visitors for up to 90 days without having to obtain a visa or undergo an in-person interview at a U.S. consulate. The terrorist attacks in Paris on November 13th demonstrated that the Visa Waiver Program represents a potential vulnerability for our country. Those terrorists killed nearly 130 people and caused over 350 injuries. At least 5 of the attackers were French nationals, 2 of whom were living in Belgium, and 1 was a Belgian national. Nationals of both France and Belgium are able to enter the United States under the Visa Waiver Program. Accordingly, at least 6 of the Paris attackers could have attempted to enter this country under the program. The Belgian neighborhood of Molenbeek, for example, is notorious for being a hotbed of Islamic jihadists. Known as Jihad Central, Molenbeek is a hellhole that is filled with Belgian national Islamic radicals who qualify to travel to the U.S. without a visa under the Visa Waiver Program. And, of course, many Islamic jihadists in places such as Syria are actually Western passport holders who could then come to this country with those Western passports after fighting jihad in Syria and Iraq. This exposes the American people to the possibility that these militants, after receiving training and undergoing further radicalization in the hotbed of the jihad, could exploit the Visa Waiver Program to enter our country. With this in mind, the U.S. must ensure that all appropriate safeguards are in place to ensure that the program cannot be exploited. A properly functioned biometric exit system is one of those safeguards. Biometric exit and overstay reporting was required as part of the Visa Waiver Permanent Program Act in 2007. Despite this, the U.S. does not have an exit system at our air, sea, and land ports of entry to track overstays as required as part of the Visa Waiver Program. In 2011, the former commissioners of the 9/11 Commission concluded, quote, "The Department of Homeland Security, properly supported by the Congress, should complete as quickly as possible a biometric entry-exit screening system. As important as it is to know when foreign nationals arrive, it is also important to know when they leave. Full deployment of the biometric exit should be a high priority. Such a capability would have assisted law enforcement and intelligence officials in August and September of 2001 in conducting a search for 2 of the 9/11 hijackers that were in the United States on expired visas. Instead of a biometric exit system, DHS has moved to implement a biographic exit system, despite the fact that former DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano told the GAO that she has no confidence in the current system. Even if a biometric exit system were implemented tomorrow, it is doubtful, though, that the administration would take the necessary action against the vast majority of visa violators. The Obama administration has circumvented duly enacted immigration laws through memoranda and executive action. Under current law, overstaying a visa or violating its terms is sufficient to render a foreign national deportable. But now, pursuant to the administration's so-called priorities, only aliens who are found to have significantly abused the visa or visa waiver programs are deportable. All too often, however, such offenders are only found after they have committed crimes in this country. The administration has taken steps to water down the terrorism bars that render aliens inadmissible or deportable by broadening the exemption authorities and redefining what constitutes material support. Finally, although the government may argue that even aliens entering under the Visa Waiver Program are subject to some level of background check, more stringent checks than the Visa Waiver Program applicants are subject to have their limitations. For example, they failed to prevent Tashfeen Malik, who along with her husband, Syed Farouk, killed 14 people in San Bernardino, California last week before she entered the United States on a fiancé visa in July 2014. And this was supposed to be a rigorous examination. This is not to say that Congress should attempt to protect the American people. This is This is to say that Congress should attempt to protect the American people from those who would come here to do us harm. In fact, the House has just passed legislation to address concerns related to the exploitation of both our refugee admission process and the visa waiver program. We'll continue to review other immigration vulnerabilities that impact our security. Today, as the House has passed the visa waiver legislation, we assess the mechanisms in place within the visa waiver program that protect our national security and help identify returning foreign fighters and identify further steps that can be made to strengthen the visa waiver program. I thank our witnesses for their testimony today. Look forward to examining issues related to the impact of terrorism on the visa waiver program and potential improvements to the program. And with that, I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Lynch.